But first and foremost, as a sort of a host on behalf of the EU here in Tirana, I hope that you are enjoying the conference. I also hope that you had a chance to see a little bit of the town. I hope that the event last night was fun. And I would want to invite you to come back to Albania. This is a beautiful country, and these are wonderful people. Come back as journalists, come back as tourists. There's a lot to see. I'm looking at the panel. I'm not sure that you wanted two women from the region.
Don't you think that she deserves applause for last night?
Good, good, good. I'm not sure that you wanted two women from the region to finish the panel, because this is going to spice things up a little bit, but I think this is why we are here. And I don't know if you have heard of Tim's long and very clear instructions for all panelists. Two things. He said, do not complain and do not be boring.
Well, I didn't say don't complain. I said,
don't pound and don't
just complain.
Yes, just complain. And I told him, you know, in my boots, it's not easy, but I'll try. I'll certainly try. And I want my interventions, please, to be understood as my interventions. I am a colleague, former colleague of yours, a former journalist. I am a foot soldier for the EU in Tirana, and very happy to be a foot soldier. But first and foremost, I see us as partners. As Nazan said, we cannot do without each other. If we want to help these societies and these countries modernize, further democratize, and really become fully fledged members of the EU, we have to work together and help each other. I have a lot of public appearances, as you can imagine, and there are two scenes that are constant. If it is a public event, there are at least 14 cameras all the time and two journalists. If it's an event that touches on social issues, be it gender issues, be it education, be it whatever is a social issue, two cameras and maybe two journalists. This shows the, I think, editorial logic, and unfortunately, I think even more the ownership logic, the logic of the owners of the media that are being sent to these events. Albania is a beautiful but rather small country. It has less than 3 million people. 3 million people are informed by 25 daily newspapers. The usual circulation around 2,000 copies. 250 broadcast media outlets, and at least 600 portals. You could say this is really absolute pluralism, a lot of freedom, but I'm not always so sure, and sometimes I have a feeling it's more chaos than freedom, for different reasons. Scene here is extremely partisan, political partisan. And messages are very personal. It's a very ad hominem scene. And it's very hard for us, I think also for journalists, to navigate through the media reality in the country. I think when you ask the question, what next? I think we have to stick to one of the few phrases that I really like from the EU vocabulary, and that's fundamentals first. And we talk about fundamentals first. There are two fundamentals here that I think we need to rely on. One are the rules, and second are the values. When it comes to rules, I think there is a need to strengthen, to revitalize, if you wish, regulation and self-regulation of the media. I think it's extremely important to pay a lot of attention to labor conditions. It's very hard to be a free journalist if you have 300 euros a month, and if you can be fired in, with an SMS. So it's very important that there are very clear and implemented laws on the labor or employment situation of journalists. I think ownership, and I know that you discussed with that, is something that we really need to look into from all angles, including sometimes from, I would say, rule of law angle. It became fashionable that every businessman wants to have his or her own media. And they are not businessmen in media, they're just businessmen. It's something else. So that's quite interesting what kind of problems and what kind of issues that carries along. I think it also brings a little bit of something that not everything that is in the public space is media, and not everybody who claims so is a journalist. Journalism is a very tough profession. It's a profession that needs to be protected as such. It's not a question of identity and then I decide I'm a journalist because I write something. It has to be very clear who is a journalist and who needs to be protected by the rules and by the sort of self-regulation of the profession. I think it's also very important to talk about responsibility. Responsibility is the other side of freedom. And I remember when I was small that there was a lot of discussion about, I think at the time there was something called Court of Honor, where journalists themselves would discuss issues and problems within their own guild. And it was a very serious instrument. If as a journalist, you would not want to be examined by your own colleagues on your lack of proper sources and etc. I would absolutely subscribe. I think everybody here said that. I think there is a need for unconditional financial support. These are very small markets. Unfortunately, they cannot self-regulate. I think it is very important that we, as European Union, invest in opportunities for independent media. We have the sectoral EPA approach. We have EPA for connectivity. We have EPA for many things, for rule of law. I think, in a sense, we give a lot of money for civil society, for democracy-based issues, but maybe we should brand it that way. I was thinking, you know, I would love to be able to call something EPA for freedom and democracy, something that would be called and would be immediately recognized as such. These are small markets, and I think it really would make a lot of sense to invest in pockets of true independence from any source of financing. I think that this would re-energize the scene as it is. It would raise the bar. It would allow for real competition, because you, even if you're not part of that small independent outlet, you would want to, you will be forced to have a quality that is similar to that one. And I think it would also help educate new generations. I think that's a very important part. It's not easy to create resilient and free-thinking societies. It's a very hard endeavor. It takes time, but in order to do this, I think media is absolutely indispensable. And the second thing I want to touch on are values. And I was thinking, you know, if we had this discussion 3 or 4 years ago, I'm not sure that I would be able to say this sentence with full heart, but now I can. After my 3 years in Albania, values are extremely important. And what keeps societies in this region deeply attracted to the EU is not the money. I think it's a social model. It's who we are. And I think we need to protect that social model and who we are, absolutely. We have, and I feel as a foot soldier here, I have a huge responsibility in defending those values. It starts with a message. My colleagues from the delegation know I'm totally obsessed with communication, with message. I think EU needs to make message less complicated. EU is very complicated, but the values are not complicated. And I think this is very important to do. people to understand that stuff. We need, we also need to be, we need to be honest when it comes to media. I know I have to hurry up, sorry. I think we must do everything to secure freedom of expression, and I would say freedom from political, but also criminal pressure. It's not only political. But there has to be a line that is a guiding line for all of us. There's this famous saying, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Fact-checking is extremely important, and I would fully subscribe to an additional effort to do that as well. We have a responsibility not to accept that lies and alternative facts become what they call new normal. There is nothing normal about that. And what we are doing here, or trying to do here in the region, is to stabilize functioning democracies. EU cannot parachute democracy on a society. It is something that is much more complex, and it has to come from the society itself as well. We are here to help, and it would be great to have some time to engage in a discussion and discuss some of the ideas that we have heard here.
All right, we haven't actually got much time, but I'm going to ask you very quickly. There was, I don't know if you were here earlier on when Aidan White got a lot of support for saying that the issue of freedom of media should be used in a much tougher sense when it comes to conditionality. You can't move to the next stage, you can't open the next chapter because we're not satisfied with what you're doing on freedom of the media. Do you think that should be the case?
This is what is our constant communication, but it's not always easy to measure it. It's like with all this, let's say, a highway you can measure. It's 15 kilometers of highway. When it comes to these things, I think we need to be engaged together much more to define what are the benchmarks that are, for us, lines that cannot be crossed. And it's very important. It's very different. I have a privilege to be able to read all the languages in the region. It's also not cut and paste. It's different in every country, and I think we need also, as the EU, to pay more sort of tailor-made attention to our particular societies.
All right, I'm going to go straight on to Tamara because we're beginning to run out of time. So thank you.
Thank you.